Every 90 seconds, someone is reported missing. Many return to their families. For others, something has gone seriously wrong. A teenage girl has vanished.
They came to my property and they searched. I had no idea where Louise was.
This isn't like Lou, that isn't what she'd do.
A community in lockdown is determined to find her.
They came out in droves to go looking for her.
There's a lot of anger and shock and panic in the community.
What happens in the police investigation that follows?
It did scare me quite a bit to actually see the police officers, helicopters, forensics and dogs.
This was a big investigation. There were lots of reports coming into police.
What happens to the family at its heart?
The most gut-wrenching, heartfelt pain. It felt like someone was ripping my stomach apart.
When missing turns to murder.
When Louise was a baby, she was very content, very happy, never cried a lot. When I found out I was pregnant, I was homeless. Went into a mother and baby hostel with social services to help me to bring my daughter up. We were in hostels for 3 years.
Louise was a young girl who had a lot of problems in her life. Her mum had been in care herself and she struggled with lots of issues. Louise had a social worker and she had engaged really well with services when she was a child, but there were a lot of what we call risk factors around the family.
It was very tough. A lot of staff watching every move I made. We just had to do what needed to be done to prove that I could be a mum on my own.
In 2009, when Louise is 6 years old, Becky moves to Lee Park in Havant, Hampshire.
I first met Louise when I used to ride my bike along Lee Park and a little girl would be waving. And then one day she came over to the bike with her mum. So I sat her on the bike and she loved it. And that became a regular occurrence. After a while, she started calling me Uncle Donk, and Rebecca still calls me it now.
Supported by social services, Becky and Louise settle into their new home, and Louise starts at a local school.
She had one main friend all through school called Chelsea. Louise and Chelsea would stay at each other's houses. They were more like sisters than friends.
Louise, she was quite a weird little kid, to be honest, but we clicked straight away because I think I was weird enough myself, to be fair, and we just become friends instantly, really. There was this really funny noise that she used to do, and she used to close her hand and put it over her mouth, and she sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks. That's the best way to describe it. We'd just be sat there in silence, and out of nowhere, she just started doing it. Everyone that was with us would just laugh. She was a funny girl.
Louise was very bubbly, very outspoken, had a heart of gold. If you felt low, you felt depressed, Louise was the one to pick you up. Louise's smile. She had the most outstanding smile.
As she grows up, Louise's behaviour becomes more challenging.
Rules, regulations went out the window. I'll do what I want, you can't make me.
All kids go through a rebellious stage as they grow up. Hormones start hitting. They start thinking that they're right, parents are wrong.
She thought she could handle the big wide world like everybody does at the age of 16. She just really wanted her freedom to do what she wanted to do. There was tension between Louise and her mum. What family don't have tension between parents and children? But I know that Louise loved her mum and her mum loved Louise.
As a mum, you want to protect your children and you just want to hold them close. As a teenager, they want to push you away. And it caused a lot of problems between me and Louise. I'd lay ground rules down that she wouldn't like, and she'd go running away to stay at her friends for the night.
She'd always argue with Rebecca, and she'd walk out, but she'd always go back home. That was her safe place to be.
Thank you!
As a teenager, Louise suffers from anxiety and depression.
Lou had a very close relationship with me when it come to telling me her worries and her insecurities and the struggles that she had with mental health. And it did get to the point where I went to Becky and I said, what's going on? Because Lou is like severely depressed.
She just all of a sudden started getting low. She started self-harming. And we got through to her, and we got her medicated. And she started to pick up again and started to be Louise.
When she finishes school, Louise is in a happier place.
She was absolutely thrilled with herself that she could go to prom. When she turned up, she had the biggest smile on her face because she felt beautiful. She felt like nothing was in her way. That was her moment. She could be her. It was nice to see that she finally just felt good and felt happy.
When she turns 16, Louise moves in with her Auntie Sammy, Becky's sister.
Louise came to stay with me because my marriage broke down, so I needed to be closer to my family. I've got little children. I've got a daughter and I've got twin boys, and they looked at her as their sister. Louise would always take time out to go play with my daughter. The boys, they loved her to bits, always jumping on the trampoline, just interacting with her so well. They really did love her. Whenever I was ill, she'd make sure that the kids were in school, picked up from school. She'd try her best to cook them dinner if I wasn't able to do it. So yeah, she was a big help around the house, and I just loved her being there.
On the 16th of April, we had a coffee morning at my sister Tiffany's house. Louise sat in the front room with all the little babies, and one of the babies was really badly teething, and Louise had sat with her for about an hour, calming her down. Very baby orientated, really good with the kids. Yeah, she was such a caring girl. On the 17th of April 2020, Louise left my sister Sammy's property. They had an argument in the morning, Sammy and Bradley, Louise's boyfriend. And my sister told Bradley to get out of her flat. And my Louise decided that she was going to follow her boyfriend and left my sister's property as well.
I couldn't physically keep her with me because where she was 16, she could get me done for holding her against her will. I just wish that he had just left when I said for him to leave. I would have calmed down and Louise would have stayed, and he would have been back that night and everything would have been fine. But I just wish I did a little bit more for her to stay.
We had just gone into lockdown, so I rang the police to say that Louise was walking the streets. I worried because of Louise's mental state. I didn't want my child walking the streets for no reason and wanted her home.
Becky's intervention causes a huge row with Louise, which plays out all over social media.
3 hours after Louise had left Sammy's property, I got a phone call from my cousin Chaslin, CJ Mays, to say that Louise was with her. Louise then stayed with Shane Mays and CJ. Louise knew CJ from a baby because CJ is my biological cousin on my dad's side of the family. Shane and CJ had been married, I think, for 8 years. Louise went and stayed with them when they lived in North End in 2013, and then she didn't see him again until 2020, when she turned up at their property on the 17th of April.
When I found out she was staying at Shane and CJ's, it was a relief because obviously it was family, so we knew that she was safe.
I'd asked CJ to keep Louise for a couple of days so that we could both calm down, because a lot of horrible things had been said between us. CJ agreed that Louise could stay for a few days.
Louise's stay with CJ and Shane turns from a few days into a few weeks.
In that 3 weeks, I'd had the odd phone call with her. Richard and I were going to be getting married, and Louise had got upset, thinking that because we weren't talking, she wasn't going to be my bridesmaid. And I spoke to her on the phone, and I said, "You'll still be my bridesmaid. You'll be there, we'll be fine by then, we'll be talking, we'll be mother and daughter again." At some point through the 3 weeks, Louise apparently spoke to her boyfriend and had told her boyfriend that Shane was flirting with her. Shane told CJ that he felt Louise was flirting with him. If a 30-year-old man thinks a 16-year-old girl is flirting, then personally, they should be nipping that in the bud and stopping it.
Shane wasn't working. He spent his days playing video games at home. There was some quite disturbing footage, and it was on Louise's phone, where he was seen tickling her feet. Louise was texting her friends saying that she didn't like it. She felt that he was flirting with her. You know, this is a 16-year-old girl who's staying in his house, and he was kind of tickling her. And the way that he was doing that just felt very uncomfortable.
Me and my mum was at Tesco's in Park Parade. I was currently pregnant with my eldest child, and Lou come past and nudged me a little bit. She said, like, "Are you okay?" And that was it. But she wouldn't talk to my mum, which me and my mum both found a little bit strange. And then I spotted someone stood outside Tesco's that I'd never really seen before. I weren't familiar with him. And then Lou's walked out of Tesco's and went and stood with the man, and they walked off up the road. Actually, the man that she was with was Shane.
I'd gone to a neighbour's for a few drinks, and my phone rang, and it was CJ to say that the police were on their way to our house. And I was like, "Well, why are the police on their way to you?" She said, "Because Louise hasn't come home." And then the phone went down, and it was about 9 o'clock. Officer contacted me asking me if Louise was at my property. They came to my property and they searched. Louise obviously wasn't mine. I had no idea where Louise was.
Shane Mays tells police he walked Louise to a local skate park that afternoon to meet some friends, and she hasn't returned.
Louise allegedly had a curfew of 6 o'clock, and at 6:32, CJ calls the police. And that seems quite soon to be making a call to the police when a 16-year-old girl hasn't returned from being out with her friends. I think most 16-year-olds are often half an hour late.
When Louise first went missing, it was reported as a missing person. So at that stage, the first phase is missing person, where's Louise gone? There was no suspicion at that stage there was anything untoward. She simply hadn't come home.
Personally, I thought Louise was just a typical teenager, gone off with her boyfriend, with her friends. Didn't want CJ to know where she was. Louise had done this numerous times with me, had gone off to her friends. Oh, don't tell my mum I'm here. Shane came to my property at 10 to 11 at night to drop me some milk off and told me that he was going back to look for Louise again because there was still no sign of her.
Louise's loved ones tried to track her down through social media.
I had learnt that Lou was missing because there was actually a post put up on Facebook, and a lot of people were like, oh, she's probably ran away for attention. And I'm not going to lie, at first I did also think she'd run away to get attention from someone. And then obviously the longer she was missing, the more I was like, this isn't like Lou, that isn't what she'd do.
Louise would have been considered what we call a high-risk victim. When a child goes missing, a risk assessment is completed, and they are deemed either low, medium, or high risk. Because of her circumstances, because of her age, because she was already at risk of being homeless, they would have put her as high risk. So a huge investigation was started into her disappearance.
The story also catches the attention of both the local and national media.
VE Day was on May the 8th, which was the day she went missing. So I think from that point onwards, police appealed to the public, and because they felt that there could be people out there, you know, having gatherings that day with dashcam footage, CCTV footage, you might have seen something or might have captured something.
From the Friday until the Monday, I thought Louise was just a normal teenager. Would come home, tail between her legs, a feel sorry for me routine. Come the Monday, I started feeling very uneasy, very agitated. Nothing seemed right. Louise was nowhere to be seen.
One thing in particular is ringing alarm bells with her family, friends, and the police.
That girl was always on her phone. She was glued to her phone. And after a while of her not being on her phone, it was more of a, hang on a minute, like what's going on?
The police continued to speak to CJ Mays and Shane Mays. They got different accounts from Shane Mays, which raised some suspicions that maybe his story wasn't correct. Louise was like any 16-year-old girl. She was involved on social media. She had quite an active presence with her friends. That coincided with stopping when Louise had left with Shane in the afternoon. He took the police on walkabouts where he said he'd taken Louise, saying that he'd taken her to a recreational ground in Emsworth. And of course that then required a massive trawl through CCTV to try and establish whether the routes he said he took Louise were correct.
But the police aren't the only ones searching for Louise.
We had friends searching everywhere. I had people, we'd put notifications up all over social media, posters of Louise missing. Can we please have help if anyone sees anything?
It was a concerning case, and we wanted to do our best to try and help find Louise. We had reporters going down to the scene every day, speaking to the community, getting feedback. There's a lot of anger and shock and panic in the community. You know, this was a 16-year-old girl who was vulnerable, impressionable, and a lot of people were concerned about her.
Social media was starting to blow up about it. There was pictures of her, missing posters of her, saying, have you seen Louise?
My family and I were told we had to stay at home in case Louise returned home. As her mum, so all I wanted to do was to be out there. I didn't want to be at home. I wanted to be on the streets. I wanted to be able to find my girl and cradle her in my arms and just take her home.
Because it was lockdown, the police were trying to encourage people to stay at home, and they would conduct the search, but they didn't. They came out in droves to go looking for her, which is absolutely understandable.
When I say the whole community literally got together, everybody come together to look for her. No matter where you would go, there was people there looking for Lou.
Havant has a large population, but a close-knit community, and I'm absolutely sure it had an impact on them.
I couldn't go out looking for Lou because I was heavily pregnant at the time. So my mum and my younger sister actually went out to look for her. I was constantly on Facebook, reading up on any updates. I was constantly refreshing the page. I was constantly typing in the Portsmouth news to see if anything had been updated. I was constantly talking to Becky, seeing if anyone had heard anything or anyone had seen anything. I was constantly just watching and hoping that something happier was going to come about of it.
The community are out searching for Louise, but rumours are circulating.
The community were horrible to me. I had a lot of the community tell me that I was involved, that I knew where my child was. I knew more about the case than everybody else, when I was no different to everybody else. I was just in the dark. Due to lockdown, the police and the liaison officers unfortunately couldn't spend a great deal of time at the property. So we would have to go down to the police station a lot to answer questions on where we thought Louise would be, where Louise would hang out. There was all sorts of questions, but the community, because they see a lot of us going down to the police station, it was all the mums being arrested, all the mums' boyfriends being arrested, friends and family supporting me, but very isolated from the community.
Meanwhile, the police investigation is moving forward.
This was a big investigation over a 2-week period. It involved the local community. There were lots of reports coming into police about activity in the Havant thicket and also activity within the Havant area, so there were lots of lines of inquiry.
But it isn't long before police have a main suspect.
The last CCTV sighting of Louise was on the 7th of May at 7:30 in the evening at Tesco's. Then no sighting of Louise on CCTV at all after that. Shane was seen on the 8th of May in the morning going to Park Parade. He then was seen on a CCTV camera at the Warren School at about 3:10 in the afternoon coming out of the thicket.
When the CCTV is reviewed and the account of Shane Mays is reviewed, it's quite clear that Shane was lying about where he had gone.
The 14th of May, I had a phone call from the 2 liaison officers to ask to go to the police station. And they told me that 2 people had been arrested on suspicion of kidnap. I asked, who's been arrested, please? At this precise moment, they weren't allowed to tell me. I was then on my way home and I heard that Swanmore Road in Lee Park was being raided. So drove round by Swanmore Road to find Shane Mays' mum's house was being ransacked by the police. I absolutely freaked. And then I went home, and as I got out of the car, the police had rang me to inform me that Shane Mays and CJ Mays had both been arrested on the suspicion of kidnapping my daughter.
Police didn't confirm who it was. They just said they'd arrested 2 people. But on the streets in Lee Park, a lot of people, put 2 and 2 together and realised who it was. So at that point, a lot of anger was directed towards them.
I still didn't want to believe that they were involved in Louise's disappearance. Why would they do that? Why would they hide her and report her missing?
Shane and CJ Mays are bailed by the police, pending further inquiries.
I think it finally hit home that something wasn't quite right when search and rescue got called in at 4 o'clock in the morning.
It did scare me quite a bit to actually see forensics and dogs and the police officers and hear helicopters. It was like a nightmare, but in real life. It was becoming more and more real. And I think that's probably what scared me the most, was how real it was becoming so quickly.
It was very unusual for a missing persons case to be so publicised with literally daily updates from the police. So it was quite clear this was a serious case. And despite saying it was a missing persons case, I think the police feared the worst as well as the community.
I think, like any person, the police clearly understood that Louise had her phone with her and probably was fairly inseparable from it. So where her phone was, there was a good chance is where she was. So they made those inquiries, and it showed that, in fact, her phone was in the area of Havant Thicket. So police conducted a massive search of the Havant Thicket area.
Louisa's mum is desperately trying to hold on to the hope that her daughter is still alive.
About a week after Louise had gone missing, I started feeling very, very sad. I've watched documentaries, and the more the days go on, the less likely it is that that person's going to be found alive. And the more days went on, the harder it was for me to hold on to that last bit of hope that my child was still out there and she was still alive. And then the worst news came. The 21st of May, at 10 to 11, my liaison officers knocked on my door. I'm sorry, Miss Cooper, but we found a body of a young girl in the woods, and we think it's Louise. The most gut-wrenching, heartfelt pain. It felt like someone was ripping my stomach apart. And everything was taken in one fell swoop.
It was all over Facebook. People were posting, a body's been found in the thicket. And you think, no, it can't be. And you're still hoping, you know, even though in the back of your mind, you knew that it was Louise. But you're always hoping that it's not going to be Louise.
I got a phone call from Becky to say to go to her house. And when I walked through her door, and Louise wasn't there, I knew that it was her that was found. When it came out of Becky's mouth, I just collapsed to the floor.
The emotion I had, it was like a hollow feeling. Like, it was my stomach, like, instantly sunk. I was like, no, it's not. That can't be her. That can't be right. She's still going to come home.
She was found at 10 to 11 in the morning. I think by about 4 o'clock that afternoon, Shane Mays was arrested on suspicion of murder. They believed Shane Mays had taken Louise to the woods. He'd punched her in the face to the extent that every bone in her face was annihilated and her jaw was detached. He then had set fire to her body. I asked them if I could see her, if I could identify her. And they said no. I couldn't even see my own child because she'd been set fire to. Sorry. And I had to identify her by a chain in a picture.
Finding out that someone who was supposedly supposed to be looking after her and was supposed to be caring for her was able to be so nasty to her. Nobody deserves that. And she definitely didn't deserve that.
Fundamentally, when I look at this case, she was failed. She was failed by those around her, and she was failed by the system. You have a young child who has a social worker, is under kind of strict checks, and when they get to the age of 16, they're at a turning point, and the child in need plan that she was on was going to come to an end, and there was no support around her. There was not that transition from being a child into an adult. And on top of that, lockdown. So social workers weren't doing home visits, and she got lost. She got lost in the system. And I think that's what went wrong here.
So this was an extremely violent murder, so it is imperative that there was a decision to remand Shane Mays into custody as early as possible. In this particular case, a colleague of mine took that decision and a holding charge was put in place. And following that holding charge, Shane Mays then appeared before the court. He was remanded into custody, and then it was adjourned to a hearing at the Crown Court. And then I took control of the case, and from that point, I was then the lawyer in charge of the case up until the trial. I review all the evidence that comes in, and I decide the level of charge, whether it's the correct charge that was laid at the beginning. If not, then I need to consider what alternative charge should be charged. Of course, in this particular case, Shane was charged with murder at the very beginning, and having reviewed the evidence that was provided by the police, it remained murder, and I indicted Shane Mays with murder for the Crown Court trial. This was an extremely serious case, and of course there is a lot of pressure felt to ensure that justice is done for the family.
Louisa's death hits everyone hard. Her family make plans to lay her to rest.
When Louisa's body was found, the community then started putting purple ribbons on lampposts. Ribbons went for miles, and flowers everywhere.
Rebecca rang me and she said, "Uncle Donk, any chance that you can organise a few bikes to follow Louise?" And I said, "Yeah, leave it with me. I'll see what I can do." So onto Facebook, onto motorbike forums all over, put it out there, and then all of a sudden it blew up. It was being shared everywhere, and it started getting big. But you never know how many are going to turn up.
In the day of Louise's funeral, me and my sisters went to Becky's house in the morning. We sat round there, just being together as a family, remembering all the funny stuff that Louise did. And then Louise turned up in a horse-drawn carriage. Her coffin was beautiful.
We had people from my house right the way up to the Oaks where Louise was cremated, lining the streets in purple T-shirts with Louise's face on, and clapping and cheering, and flowers being thrown at her coffin. It was an amazing day.
And I didn't realise how many bikes were behind me. It wasn't until we got to the crematorium and I pulled up after the horse and carriage had gone in, and all these bikes just kept coming and coming and coming. And I just couldn't believe it, how many actually turned up to see Louise off. Very proud moment, very proud moment.
Louise would have been in her element. She loved motorbikes, the roaring of the engine, the looks of the motorbikes. She would have been the first one standing there cheering them all along. So it was only right that we did it for her.
She craved to have attention and to have love and to have all eyes on her, really. That's all she wanted. And unfortunately, she didn't get to see that people did love her and people did care for her and still do and always will.
I knew Lou was happy that day because there wasn't a cloud in the sky, and it was just a real beautiful send-off. It really was.
Shane Mays is on remand in prison awaiting his trial, and the police decide to take no further action against CJ.
Shane Mays had denied the offence all the way along. He had had psychiatric reports conducted upon him to try and provide a psychiatric defence to the offence of murder. They were unsuccessful, and it wasn't until a week before trial that that changed, where he provided what's called a defence case statement. And in that defence case statement, Shane Mays set out why it was he wasn't guilty of murder. But what he did say is that he was guilty of manslaughter. Shane Mays accepted responsibility for assaulting Louise. He gave some veiled indication that as he left the area, there were 3 other males sitting on a log nearby. The suggestion being that maybe they then went in and did something, but he wasn't responsible for what the police found.
I think there was a sense of relief. There's also a sense of anger and shock. This was confirmation that he did, in fact, do it. But I think people felt like it was murder.
There was no question in my mind that Shane Mays was responsible for the murder of Louise Smith, and it didn't take a great deal of thought to reject the proposition that he was only guilty of manslaughter. So it was an easy decision to carry on for the murder trial.
Shane Mays' trial begins at Winchester Crown Court.
Trial was on for nearly 4 weeks. I was there every day from the moment it started, right the way through till the very last day of sentencing. My anxiety level was through the roof. I felt very closed and very shut off from a lot of people.
Shane Mays decides to take the stand in his own defence.
A row broke out, as what he told the court. He said she started hitting him with a stick. He then grabbed the stick off her and then started punching her. She then goes down. He carries on punching her, and the injuries are just brutal. Mays claimed that he left her alive, moaning, but prosecutors said Mays had lured Louise to Havant Thicket, possibly with sexual motives, which were then spurned by Louise. He then became angry towards her and barbarically attacked her, and then returned and set fire to her body, which was left defiled.
Shane Mays was a man that wanted to control. He wanted power over Louise. He treated her as an object. He wanted her. I think he wanted her sexually. And whatever happened in that interaction that day, I think that she rebuffed him. And he got angry because he didn't have control over her at that point. He went into overkill. The anger that was unleashed on that poor girl's body is, you can't even bear to think about it.
The police did an immense amount of work in the early stages of the investigation, which is why the evidence was so strong and we were able to present it in the way it was.
Her body was violated in such a horrific way. And from my perspective, looking at it, there was absolutely a sexual motivation.
They were able to establish that a stick that had been inserted into Louise had Shane's DNA on it. Blood that was on Shane's shoes had Louise's DNA on it. So the two together, with the CCTV evidence, was a clear indication not only was Shane lying and had been from day one, but he'd been in the area where Louise's body had been found. And not only that, he was tied directly to an implement that was penetrated into her body.
It was a barbaric murder. It was calculating. And it was just shocking in the sense that he was effectively her uncle.
It doesn't matter how strong a case is, you don't know what a jury's going to do. So I hope for the best, and I hope the jury, based on the strength of the evidence before them, would convict Shane Mays, but you just don't know.
We had 12 jurors, and there was 2 that I was very, very sceptical with, and the whole way through the case, I thought that they were taking Shane's side. When they went out, we were told it can take days, so be prepared for a long wait. I think we were out there for about 3 hours, and the jury came back. The judge asked if they'd made a decision, and then they were asked how they decided, and I remember my stomach knotted. And the foreman said, guilty.
When the jury returned, there was a unanimous guilty verdict. Shane Mays was given life imprisonment, but he has to serve a minimum term of 25 years.
I've worked as a crime reporter for many, many years. This case was particularly barbaric. The betrayal that Shane Mays inflicted on Louise was absolutely despicable. Certainly one of the worst cases that I've ever covered, and something that will stay with me in my role as a reporter.
He's away, hopefully, for the rest of his life. Hopefully he'll never get released. And I hope that every single day that he's in that prison, he suffers.
I can't put into words properly the pain and the anguish he's caused myself, my family.
As happy as I am that he's behind bars and that he's away, I'm still so angry at the fact that he gets the privilege of just being able to grow old. She didn't even get the privilege of reaching an adult. And that's probably what hurts the most.
He took a big piece of our lives away from us. We will never forgive him for what he did. He is a monster.
The sad thing is, when you look at this case, you almost have a feeling of this girl didn't stand a chance. There were so many things that were going wrong for her. There's all those risk factors there in the background. Then lockdown, arguments with family members that put her into a vulnerable situation. It's almost like a perfect storm.
Despite still struggling with their own guilt, Louisa's friends and family are determined to keep her memory alive.
I feel guilty for letting my child stay with Shane and CJ and not talking to her more in that 3 weeks, because maybe I would have known that something was going on and that Louise was in some sort of trouble. I wish I'd never trusted him with my child.
Just knowing that she will never come back. I think when I come to realise that, it just broke me, because I miss it every day. I wish things were different. To this day, I blame myself. If things ended differently, she would still be at home, being the happy girl that she was, and she'd still be here. I never got a chance to say I'm sorry. I never got to tell her how much she meant to me, how much I loved her, how much my children loved her. But deep down, I hope she knew that
Louise was very excited to meet my little girl, and she was like telling me all the things she wanted to do with her. It just hurts to know that she can't be here to see what a mischievous little girl that Millie has actually turned into, because I'm sure they would have got on incredibly.
Life's never been the same since. Everything's quiet. Every day she's with me, but not with me. And it's hard. She was my rock, and now I have to find a new way of living.